They say veterans make the worst victims. We train for hypervigilance in combat zones, learn to spot hidden dangers lurking in everyday scenarios, and develop instincts that supposedly keep us safe. But somehow, I miss the enemy living in my own home. 10 years of marriage, and I never once verified our retirement accounts. They teach you to secure your perimeter in the military, but they don't teach you how to spot when your husband is quietly plotting his escape route. My name is Morgan Riley. I'm a retired Army combat medic, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought was important and discovered something I was never meant to find. Before I jump into my story, tell me where you're tuning in from. If this resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I'm sharing the one decision that completely turned everything around for me. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs, the unexplained absences, the sudden password changes on his phone, the way Ryan would change the subject whenever I mentioned our future plans. But you never want to believe the person sharing your bed is capable of betrayal. Not until the evidence is staring you right in the face. It was a Thursday morning when my world imploded. I remember it clearly because I had just finished a double shift at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center where I volunteer. I should have been exhausted, ready to collapse into bed. Instead, I came home to an empty checking account, a half-empty closet, and a hastily scrawled note on our kitchen counter. "I'm sorry. I need to help someone I care about. Please try to understand." 15 years together, 10 of them married, erased with a single sentence. But Ryan didn't realize who he was dealing with. He didn't understand that the discipline and persistence that kept me alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan would be the same qualities that would uncover his deception. He didn't expect me to find the hidden email account, and he certainly never intended for me to discover what his cryptic message really meant. I've spent my career believing in preparedness, in having contingency plans for when things go wrong. This is the story of how I followed the digital breadcrumbs, uncovered the truth, and discovered that sometimes betrayal is just the beginning of a much bigger revelation. Let me tell you about my life before everything fell apart. I grew up in Pinewood, a small town where everybody knew your business before you did. My father was career military, 3 decades in the Army. My mother worked as a high school nurse. From them, I learned about service, sacrifice, and the importance of helping others. When I enlisted at 18, nobody was surprised. The military was in my blood. That's where I met Tessa and Amir, who became my unit family as we trained as combat medics together. We were inseparable through training, deployment, and even after we returned home. They were more than friends. They were the family you choose. The ones who understand parts of you that civilians never can. And that's also where I met Ryan Cooper. He wasn't military. He worked as a civilian contractor, managing logistics systems. Our paths crossed during my second deployment. I was treating a contractor with heat exhaustion when Ryan walked in to check on his colleague. Later, he claimed he fell for me the moment he saw me efficiently inserting an IV while calmly reassuring my patient. I was just doing my job, but something about his admiration felt genuine. "Specialist Riley," he said, extending his hand after his friend was stable. "That was impressive work. Your patient's lucky you were here." I remember feeling a flutter of something, not quite pride, but recognition. In the middle of a war zone, someone had seen me as more than just another uniform. "Just doing what I'm trained for," I replied, peeling off my gloves. "Well, your training obviously took," he smiled. "Let me buy you a coffee sometime. The contractor side has the good stuff. Not that military-grade sludge you all suffer through." Coffee turned into walks around the base perimeter. Walks turned into dinners at the mess hall. By the time my deployment ended, we were inseparable. When I received my honorable discharge after 10 years of service, my body finally telling me it couldn't take another tour, Ryan followed me back to civilian life. We settled in Meridian, a mid-sized city with a decent veterans hospital, where I could get the care I needed for my service-related injuries while using my medical training to help other vets. Our wedding was small, just Tessa and Amir standing beside me, Ryan's brother as his best man, and our parents watching with misty eyes. I wore my dress uniform instead of a wedding gown. Ryan said I'd never looked more beautiful. We built what I thought was a good life. I transitioned to civilian work at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, using my medical training to help others like me adjust to life after service. Ryan's logistics expertise landed him a good position with a national supply chain management company. We bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Our marriage wasn't perfect. Whose is? We both carried baggage, my PTSD from things I'd seen in the field, his childhood insecurities from growing up with a volatile father, but we were committed to working through our issues together. At least, that's what I believed. We didn't have children, partly by choice, partly because my last deployment had left me with complications that made pregnancy unlikely. Instead, we poured our energy into our careers and our future. We saved diligently, making plans for early retirement, maybe traveling to the places I'd only seen through the lens of military service. As a medic, I had learned to stay calm in chaos, to manage resources carefully, to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Ryan and I maintained a joint account for household expenses and our retirement savings, plus separate accounts for personal spending. So I don't have to explain every coffee shop visit, I joked, though in reality, my individual account was where I deposited my VA disability payments, money that was mine alone. Our shared account was where we pooled the bulk of our earnings. Ryan's generous corporate salary and my more modest income from the rehabilitation center, mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, and most importantly, our retirement savings all came from there. Nearly $350,000, 10 years of careful planning, of skipping vacations, of buying used cars instead of new ones, of putting away every bonus and tax refund. Our future security. I rarely checked the statements. Ryan managed our finances. He was better with numbers, more disciplined about tracking investments. "You save lives, I'll save money," he'd say with that crooked smile that still made my heart skip after all these years. It was our arrangement, and it worked, until it didn't. The morning everything changed, I'd been up since 5 a.m., finishing a double shift at the rehabilitation center. We'd had an influx of new veterans, many with complex trauma similar to what I'd experienced. The work was emotionally draining but fulfilling. These were my people, and I understood their struggles in ways many civilian healthcare workers couldn't. I texted Ryan at 7:30 a.m. to let him know I was heading home, but received no response. Not unusual. He was probably in the shower or already driving to work. I stopped for breakfast burritos from the food truck Ryan loved, thinking a surprise breakfast might brighten his day. The house was quiet when I arrived. Ryan's car wasn't in the driveway, which struck me as odd. He usually left for work around 8:30, and it was only 8:10. I called out his name as I entered. No answer. I checked our bedroom. His side of the closet had conspicuous gaps where his favorite clothes should have been. His toiletries were missing from the bathroom. A cold feeling settled in my stomach, that combat instinct that something was very wrong. I called his cell, straight to voicemail. I called his office. Mr. Cooper called in yesterday to say he'd be taking personal leave for the rest of the week, his assistant told me, sounding confused. "I assumed you knew. Family emergency," he said. That's when I checked our joint account online. Balance, $782.16. Our $350,000 in savings, gone. I stared at the screen, refreshing the page multiple times, as if the numbers might magically change. But the balance remained the same, $782.16, not even enough to cover our upcoming property tax payment. I sat down hard on the kitchen stool, the breakfast burritos forgotten on the counter. This had to be a mistake, a bank error, a glitch in the system. But even as I tried to rationalize it, my medic's instincts were screaming, preparing for the worst-case scenario. That's when I found the note on the kitchen counter, hastily scrawled, in Ryan's handwriting, "I'm sorry, I need to help someone I care about. Please try to understand." My hands shook as I tried to call him again, straight to voicemail. I texted, called his brother, even his parents in Oregon. Nobody had heard from him, or at least that's what they claimed. I returned to our bedroom with new eyes, not as a wife, but as someone trained to assess situations quickly and thoroughly. The closet wasn't just missing a few items. All his favorite clothes were gone. The expensive watch I'd given him for our 5th anniversary, the leather duffel bag he loved, his passport. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. I called Tessa, my voice barely steady. "Ryan's gone, and he took our savings." She arrived 20 minutes later, still in her EMT uniform from her overnight shift. One look at my face and she wrapped me in a hug. "We'll figure this out," she said firmly. "That's what we do, right? We solve problems." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "I need to report the theft." "Are you sure it's theft?" she asked carefully. "Joint accounts are legally complicated. He had access. $350,000, Tessa. Our entire retirement fund. He didn't just take his half." A bitter laugh escaped me. "He didn't even leave enough to cover next month's mortgage," she nodded grimly. "Then we treat it like any other mission. Intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, tactical response." "When did you last see him?" I thought back. "Yesterday morning. He kissed me goodbye like any other day, said he had meetings all day and might miss dinner." I shook my head. "I guess he meant he might miss all the dinners from now on." "And the money? When was it last all there?" I hesitated, shame washing over me. "I don't know. I haven't checked the account in months. Ryan handled all that." How could I have been so careless, so trusting? I, who had been trained to verify everything, to never assume safety without confirming it. Tessa didn't judge me. She just nodded. "First step, call the bank, freeze what's left in the account. Then we check credit cards, other accounts, see if there's a pattern." For the next few hours, that's exactly what we did. Called the bank, filed a report, began documenting everything. The bank representative was sympathetic but not particularly helpful. "The withdrawals were authorized, Mrs. Cooper," she explained. "There were multiple transactions over the past 2 weeks, all using the correct credentials and security protocols." "But I didn't authorize them," I insisted. "Your husband did. And it's a joint account. 2 weeks. He'd been methodically draining our account for 2 weeks, and I hadn't noticed. Each withdrawal just under the amount that would trigger a notification alert. He knew exactly what he was doing." "Can you tell me where the money went?" I asked, my military training kicking in. Gather intelligence, understand the enemy's movements. Most transfers were to an account at First Western Bank. I frowned. We didn't have an account there. By evening, the initial shock had hardened into something else: determination. This wasn't just about a husband leaving his wife. This was a calculated betrayal on multiple levels. And if there's one thing the military taught me, it was how to respond to an attack. "I need to go to the office," I told Tessa. "Use my work computer to look for any digital trail." At the Veterans Center, my colleague Dr. Martinez was understanding, but firm. "Morgan, I can't officially authorize you to use center resources for this." "I know," I said. "I'm just using my computer on my own time." He gave me a long look. Divorce is hard enough without financial complications. I didn't correct him that this wasn't divorce. It was theft, abandonment, betrayal. I just nodded. With Tessa's help, I began piecing together Ryan's movements over the past month. Credit card receipts showed lunch meetings at expensive restaurants I'd never heard him mention. A charge at a jewelry store 3 weeks ago, certainly not for anything he'd given me. A hotel downtown last Friday when he'd told me he was working late. "Classic signs of an affair," Tessa murmured, looking over my shoulder. The thought had occurred to me, but hearing it said aloud made my stomach clench. An affair was one thing. People made mistakes. Relationships were complicated. But to clean out our life savings to vanish without a word, that went beyond an affair. I need to find out who she is, I said. Why does it matter? It might help me find him. And my money. By midnight, we had a name. Natalie Winters, executive assistant at Ryan's company, 28 years old, 12 years younger than me. Her social media showed a woman with expensive tastes. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, champagne brunches. Her last post was from 2 days ago. A close-up of her manicured hand holding a hospital admission form, the caption reading, "Sometimes life throws curveballs. So grateful for those who step up when it counts. Blessed." I stared at her perfect nails, the diamond bracelet just visible on her wrist. Was this what Ryan wanted? Someone young and flashy? Someone who hadn't spent years dealing with PTSD and service-related injuries? Wait, hospital admission form? I zoomed in on the image. The form was partially visible, with admitting diagnosis showing meningioma resection. Brain tumor surgery, I said, my medical training kicking in automatically. She's having brain tumor surgery. Tessa looked over my shoulder. Non-cancerous in most cases, but still serious. Expensive too, even with insurance. The pieces were falling into place. Ryan's note. I need to help someone I care about. The drained savings account. The hospital form. He took our retirement fund to pay for his girlfriend's brain surgery, I said, the words sounding surreal as I spoke them. I searched for Natalie Winters in the patient database of Meridian General Hospital. No matches. I tried the 3 other major hospitals in our region. Nothing. She might be using a different name, Tessa suggested, or they could have gone to a specialized facility out of state. I nodded, scanning Natalie's social media for any clues about where she might have gone for treatment. Then I spotted something, a comment from another user. Wishing you the best at Mayo. They're the best in the country for this. You're in good hands. Mayo Clinic, one of the top medical facilities in the country, with locations in Minnesota, Arizona, and Florida. Which Mayo location would be best for a meningioma? I asked Tessa, my medical mind already running through the possibilities. Rochester, Minnesota, she replied immediately. Their neurosurgery department is world-renowned. I searched for flights to Rochester, Minnesota from our city over the past week. There it was, 2 tickets purchased 3 days ago by Ryan Cooper. Destination, Rochester. Return date, open. I sat back, the reality sinking in. My husband had taken our life savings and flown across the country with his girlfriend so she could have brain surgery at one of the best hospitals in the world. What now? Tessa asked. I stared at the flight information, remembering my own medical struggles after returning from deployment. The VA hospital with its overworked staff and endless waiting lists. The treatments denied because they were experimental. The nights Ryan had held me through pain and nightmares, promising we'd figure it out together. And now he'd emptied our account for another woman's medical care. Now, I said slowly, I need to access my other account. What other account? I hadn't told anyone about this account, not even Tessa, not even Ryan. After my second tour, when I was recovering from the IED injury, I made a decision, I explained, my voice steady. I realized how quickly security could be taken away, so I started putting money aside, separate from our joint savings. Your VA disability payments? Tessa guessed. I nodded. And part of every paycheck. Nothing that would impact our household. Budget or retirement planning, but enough to create a safety net that was mine alone. How much? I hesitated. I'd never said the amount aloud. A little over $275,000? Tessa's eyes widened. Morgan, that's paranoid, secretive, untrusting? I laughed bitterly. Turns out it was necessary. I was going to say smart, she corrected. But why didn't you tell Ryan about it? I thought about the countless veterans I'd seen struggle after returning home, not just with physical injuries or PTSD, but with the fundamental loss of independence, of self-determination. How many marriages had I watched crumble under the D? Strain? Because it wasn't about Ryan, I said finally. It was about making sure that no matter what happened, I'd never be helpless. After depending on the military system, then the VA system, I needed something that was completely under my control. Tessa nodded, understanding in her eyes. We'd both seen too many fellow veterans end up homeless, helpless, or worse when their support systems failed. So, what's the plan? Go to Rochester? I considered our options. Flying to Minnesota, confronting Ryan and Natalie at the hospital, what would that accomplish? The money was already spent or committed to her medical care. And despite everything, I couldn't fault someone for seeking life-saving treatment. No, I decided. Not yet. First, I need more information about exactly what happened to our money. If he spent it all on her treatment, that's one thing. But if there's more to this story I need to know, I turned back to the computer, pulling up our phone records. Ryan and I shared a family plan, another thread of connection I'd now need to sever. I scanned the call logs for the past month, looking for patterns. Multiple calls to the same unknown number began appearing about 6 months ago, increasing in frequency and duration. The most recent call had been yesterday, to Meridian Community Bank, a small local institution where we didn't have accounts. What would he be calling a local bank for if he's in Minnesota? I wondered aloud. Tessa shrugged. Only one way to find out. Meridian Community Bank opened at 9 a.m. I was there at 8:45, watching employees arrive, studying the layout. Years of military service had taught me to observe, to look for patterns, to identify potential allies. I noticed a middle-aged woman unlocking the doors, her movements suggesting authority. Branch manager, probably. Perfect. At 9:05, I walked in and approached her desk, taking note of the nameplate. Patricia Donovan, branch manager. Good morning, I said with my most professional smile. I'm hoping you can help me with some information about account transfers. Patricia gestured for me to sit. I'll certainly try. What kind of information are you looking for? My husband recently transferred a substantial amount from our joint account at First Capital Bank to yours. I believe he may have opened a new account here, but I'm not listed on it. Her expression shifted slightly, caution replacing welcome. I see. Well, I'm afraid I can't discuss specific account details without proper authorization. Banking privacy laws. Of course, I interrupted smoothly. I'm not asking for account access. I'm simply trying to understand if a transfer was completed successfully. You see, my husband is currently out of state dealing with a medical emergency, and I need to ensure our finances are in order while he's gone. Patricia studied me, clearly weighing her professional obligations against my seemingly reasonable request. I understand your concern, Mrs. Cooper. Morgan Cooper. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Cooper. Ryan Cooper's wife? My pulse quickened. Yes, so you do know my husband? She hesitated. Mr. Cooper did conduct business here recently, but as I mentioned, I can't disclose specifics about any accounts. I leaned forward slightly. Patricia, I'm going to be very direct with you. My husband emptied our joint savings account, $350,000, and disappeared. The only clue I have is a recent call from him to this bank. I'm not asking you to violate any regulations, but if there's anything you can tell me that might help me understand what's happening, I would be deeply grateful. Her expression softened with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. Mrs. Cooper, I'm very sorry about your situation, but I'm a retired Army combat medic, I added quietly. I served 10 years, including 2 tours in Afghanistan. All I'm trying to do is protect what's left of my financial security. The military connection hit home. I could see it in her eyes. Patricia glanced around the empty bank, then lowered her voice. I can't give you specifics, but I will say this. Mr. Cooper did not open an account here. Then why was he calling? This bank? She chose her words carefully. He was inquiring about a wire transfer to another institution. Mayo Clinic? I guessed. I really can't say more, she replied, but her expression confirmed my suspicion. However, she added after a moment, wire transfers of that size typically require additional verification procedures, especially when they're international. International? My mind raced. Mayo Clinic was in Minnesota. Domestic, not international. Patricia maintained her professional composure, but her eyes conveyed that she'd already said more than she should have. That's all I can tell you, Mrs. Cooper. I'm truly sorry. I thanked her and left, my mind buzzing with this new information. An international wire transfer. Not just to Mayo Clinic for Natalie's surgery. Where else was our money going? Back in my car, I called Amir. Unlike Tessa, who excelled at medical knowledge and emotional support, Amir had transitioned from military service into cybersecurity. If anyone could help me trace international money movements, it was him. I need your help, I said when he answered. It's urgent. 2 hours later, we sat in Amir's home office, surrounded by multiple computer screens. So your husband drained your joint account, supposedly for his girlfriend's brain surgery at Mayo Clinic. But now you've discovered some of the money went international? Amir summarized, typing rapidly. And you want me to do what exactly? Find out where the money went, and why. He sighed. Morgan, that's not exactly legal without proper authorization. Neither is stealing your wife's retirement savings, I countered. But fine, stay within legal boundaries. Just help me understand what might have happened. Amir nodded and began, explaining how international wire transfers worked, the tracking systems, the verification requirements, the typical destinations for large sums. Common places for hiding money overseas include Switzerland, Cayman Islands, Singapore, places with strict banking privacy laws, he explained. But moving large sums requires documentation. There are anti-money laundering protocols. Ryan works in corporate logistics, I pointed out. He understands systems, documentation requirements. He'd know how to make everything look legitimate. Amir continued searching through financial forums and databases, careful to stay on the right side of legality. After 30 minutes, he sat back with a troubled expression. There's something you should see, he said, turning one of the screens toward me. It showed a news article from 6 months ago, right around when the calls to Natalie had started, increasing. The headline read, Logicorp employee under investigation for embezzlement scheme. Logicorp, Ryan's company. I quickly scanned the article. A mid-level manager named James Harrington had been accused of embezzling nearly $500,000 through falsified vendor contracts. The company was conducting a full audit of all departments. Ryan's department would have been part of that audit, I said slowly. Amir nodded. And if he was involved or worried about being implicated, he might have been moving money offshore as a contingency plan. The realization hit me like a physical blow. But that doesn't explain Natalie or Mayo Clinic. Maybe it does, Amir said, pulling up Natalie's social media profile. Look at her job title again. Executive assistant to the CFO, the chief financial officer, who would have been overseeing the embezzlement investigation. You think she was helping him cover his tracks? I asked, the pieces starting to align in a disturbing new pattern. Or they were working together, Amir suggested. Executive assistants often have access to sensitive financial information, authorization codes, internal systems. I stared at Natalie's photo. Was the brain tumor even real? Or was it an elaborate cover story to explain their disappearance and the missing money? I picked up my phone, hesitated, then called Meridian General Hospital. This is Dr. Peterson from Mayo Clinic Rochester, I said, adopting my most authoritative medical voice. I'm trying to coordinate follow-up care for a neurosurgery patient being discharged to your area, Natalie Winters. After a moment, the clerk replied, I'm not showing any pending transfers or care coordination requests for that patient. What about under Cooper? Natalie Cooper? No, nothing under either name. Are you sure she's being discharged to our facility? Thanked the clerk and hung up, my suspicions growing stronger. If Natalie had actually undergone brain surgery at Mayo, there would be care coordination with a local hospital for follow-up. The fact that there wasn't suggested either they weren't planning to return to Meridian, or there was no surgery. We need to find out if she's really at Mayo, I told Amir. And if not, where they actually went. He considered this. I might be able to check flight manifests, but that's definitely crossing into gray legal territory. I hesitated, then made a decision. Let's try something else first, something simple. I pulled out my phone again and dialed Ryan's number, not expecting him to answer. But this time I heard one ring before it went to voicemail. Unlike before, it wasn't turned off. His phone is on, I said, excitement building. Can you locate it? Amir's fingers flew across the keyboard. If you're on a family plan and have admin access, we might be able to use the carrier's location service. 5 minutes later, we were staring at a map ping. Ryan's phone wasn't in Rochester, Minnesota. It was in Aruba. Aruba, a Caribbean paradise, and, not coincidentally, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States for financial crimes. Son of a bitch, I whispered, staring at the blinking dot on the screen. There's no brain tumor. There's no surgery at Mayo. They took the money and ran. Amir looked grim. If they're involved in embezzlement at Lagacorp, this could be bigger than just your retirement savings. They might have stolen from the company too. I paced Amir's office, my military training kicking in, assess the situation, identify objectives, develop a plan of action. But the emotions kept interfering. Betrayal, anger, humiliation. How had I missed this? How had I lived with Ryan for a decade and never seen what he was capable of? We need to be smart about this, Amir cautioned. If they've committed corporate fraud, that's a federal offense. This is bigger than a domestic dispute over a joint account. He was right. My personal hurt had to take a backseat to the bigger picture. I took a deep breath, forcing myself back into the analytical mindset that had kept me alive in combat zones. First, we need confirmation, I said. We need to know exactly what crimes have been committed before we involve authorities. I've got a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Amir said. Former Army, like us. I can reach out hypothetically. While Amir made that call, I used my medical connections to verify whether Natalie Winters had ever been diagnosed with a meningioma. A former colleague now working at Meridian's largest neurology practice owed me a favor. I'd helped his son through a difficult PTSD episode after he returned from Iraq. No record of any Natalie Winters with a brain tumor diagnosis in our system, he confirmed. And we handle most of the neurological cases in the Tri-County area. If she'd been diagnosed locally, chances are it would have been through us. By evening, the picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing. Amir's FBI contact, while speaking hypothetically, had confirmed that Lagacorp was under federal investigation for a complex embezzlement scheme that went far beyond James Harrington. The company's entire financial department was under scrutiny, including several executives. The feds believe multiple employees were siphoning funds through fake vendor accounts, Amir explained. The total amount could be in the millions. They've been building a case quietly for months. And Ryan figured out he was about to be caught, I reasoned. So he grabbed our savings and fled with the CFO's assistant, who probably had inside knowledge about the investigation. Amir nodded. The timing fits. The question is, what do you want to do about it? What did I want? Part of me wanted revenge, pure, simple, and complete. Another part just wanted my money back. And a small wounded part wanted answers, wanted to hear Ryan explain himself, to understand how he could betray not just me, but his company, his friends, everything we'd built. "I want what's mine," I said finally, "but I also want justice." We spent the next hour developing a plan. Simply calling the FBI would set wheels in motion that I couldn't control. Once federal authorities were officially involved, recovering my personal funds might become secondary to their larger case. I needed leverage first. If I go to Aruba, I mused, confront them directly. "That's incredibly risky," Amir warned. "If they're desperate enough to flee the country, they're desperate enough to be dangerous." "I spent a decade in war zones," I reminded him. "I can handle 2 white-collar criminals in a beach resort." But even as I said it, I recognized the false bravado. This wasn't a battlefield with clear enemies and allies. This was personal betrayal mixed with potential federal crimes, and I was emotionally compromised. "There's another approach," Amir suggested cautiously. "One that might give you more leverage." "I'm listening." "Ryan doesn't know about your private account, the $275,000 you've saved." I saw where he was going. "You think I should use that as bait?" "Not exactly. But right now, Ryan thinks he's gotten away clean. He has no idea you've tracked him to Aruba or connected him to the embezzlement investigation. What if we let him think he's succeeded and then wait for him to reach out?" "Why would he reach out?" "He has my money. He has his girlfriend. He's on a beach in Aruba." Amir smiled grimly. "Because embezzlers rarely stop at enough. And because $350,000 won't last forever, especially with their lifestyle expectations. Sooner or later, he'll need more money, and he might think you have access to more." The plan started to take shape. Instead of chasing Ryan, we would make him come to us, or at least establish contact on our terms. But we needed to create the right conditions. First, I made a series of visible financial moves that Ryan might be monitoring. I took out a home equity line of credit on our house. I listed some of my jewelry on online auctions, including the diamond earrings Ryan had given me for our 5th anniversary. I started researching bankruptcy protection, making sure to use our shared laptop, which synced browsing history to his devices. Then I waited. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan's number. "We need to talk." No apology, no explanation. Just a demand for communication when it served his needs. Typical. I waited 4 hours before responding. "About what?" His reply came quickly. "About our situation. I know you must have questions." Questions? I had interrogation techniques I'd learned from Special Forces operatives, but I kept my response neutral. "Yes, many." "I can explain everything," he texted. "It's more complicated than you think." I could practically see him crafting this narrative, trying to find an angle that would serve his purposes. I waited another hour before responding. "I'm listening." The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before his next message. "Arrived. I need your help with something first, a financial matter. Then I'll explain everything and make things right." There it was, exactly as Amir had predicted. Ryan needed more money, and he thought I might be a source. I conferred with Amir and Tessa before crafting my response. We needed to keep him engaged without promising anything. "What kind of financial matter?" I finally texted back. "Can we talk by phone?" "It's complicated." I agreed to a call the next morning, setting the stage for the next phase of our plan. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with questions and contingencies. What story would Ryan spin? How much did he know about the federal investigation? What exactly did he want from me? Most importantly, how could I use this opportunity to recover my savings and ensure Ryan faced consequences for his actions? Morning came with a clarity I hadn't felt since discovering Ryan's betrayal. For the first time, I wasn't merely reacting to his actions. I was setting the terms of engagement. The military strategist in me knew the value of controlling the battlefield. Atino. Precisely 10 a.m., my phone rang. Morgan. Ryan's voice sounded different, a subtle strain beneath the casual tone, like a man trying too hard to seem relaxed. I had Amir beside me, the call on speaker, recording equipment ready. Ryan. It's been a while. I kept my voice neutral, giving away nothing. I know this must seem abrupt, my leaving. Abrupt? You stole our life savings and disappeared. That's a bit more than abrupt. He sighed heavily. Look, I know how it appears, but there's more to the story. Natalie needed emergency surgery, a meningioma, brain tumor. Time was critical. I let the lie hang in the air for a moment. A brain tumor? That's awful. Which hospital is treating her? A slight hesitation. Mayo Clinic. Their neurosurgery department is world-class. Mayo in Rochester? How's her recovery going? As well as can be expected. These procedures are complex. I nodded to Amir, who was typing rapidly on his laptop, documenting each fabrication. And why did her brain tumor surgery require emptying our retirement account without telling me? I tried to tell you, Ryan insisted, defensiveness creeping into his voice. You were working doubles at the rehab center. You were exhausted. And her insurance denied coverage, called it experimental. We needed to move quickly. I remembered all the times the VA had denied my treatments using similar language. Ryan was weaponizing my own medical history against me. A calculated low blow. That still doesn't explain why you took everything, Ryan. $350,000 for one surgery? The WCDO. Procedure, the specialists, the facility fees, post-operative care. It adds up fast. Plus, we needed living expenses while we're here for her recovery. And why is her recovery happening in Aruba? The silence that followed told me everything. When Ryan finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. How did you know you're lying about Mayo? Know you're actually in Aruba? Know about the LogiCorp embezzlement investigation? Which part surprises you most, Ryan? Another silence then. You don't understand the situation. Enlighten me. I can't over the phone. His voice lowered. Look, there are people involved. In this, powerful people. I was trying to protect you by keeping you out of it. By stealing my retirement savings? That's an interesting protection strategy. Morgan, please. I need your help. There's been a complication. With Natalie's non-existent brain tumor, he abandoned the pretense. We need more capital. I know you have resources I don't know about. What makes you think that? Come on, Morgan. We've been married 10 years. You think I didn't notice the careful accounting? The VA payments that never quite matched our household contributions? You've been squirreling away money for years. I felt a chill. He'd known about my separate savings all along, or at least suspected. You're calling to ask for more money? After stealing $350,000? It's not stealing when it's a joint account, he countered. Legally, I had every right to those funds. Tell that to the FBI. Another pause. You've contacted federal authorities? Not yet, but I know they're already investigating LogiCorp. How long before they connect you to the missing vendor payments? How long before they freeze all your accounts in Aruba? You're bluffing, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. The feds are looking at Harrington, not me. They started with Harrington. Now they're examining the entire financial department, including suspicious activities involving the CFO's office, where your girlfriend works. Ryan's breathing changed, faster, shallower. What do you want, Morgan? My money back, all of it. I can't. Most of it's already allocated. Allocated to what? Certainly not medical bills. He lowered his voice again. Look, I got involved in something complicated. We used our savings as buy-in for an investment opportunity. High risk, high reward. It's going to pay off big, but we need to increase our position. That's why I'm calling. An investment opportunity, I repeated flatly. Or a money laundering operation to hide the embezzled funds? You always were too smart for your own good, he muttered. Fine. Here's the deal. I need $200,000. You transfer it to the account I'll send you. In return, when our operation concludes in 3 months, I'll return your original $350,000 plus another $350,000, double your money. And if I refuse, then you'll never see a penny of the original funds again. And Morgan, if you go to the feds, I'll make sure they know you were complicit. All those equipment requisitions you signed at the rehab center, I altered the numbers afterward. It'll look like you were diverting VA resources for personal gain. You'll lose your pension, maybe face charges. My blood ran cold. The requisition forms, I'd signed hundreds over the years, trusting the amounts were accurate. Had he really been setting me up as a contingency plan all along? You're threatening me now? I'm giving you options. Transfer the money, get a substantial lie. Return, and we both walk away clean. Or risk everything by playing hero. I caught Amir's eye. He nodded slightly, confirming the recording was capturing everything. I need time to think, I said carefully. You have 24 hours. After that, we move forward without you, and the consequences are on your head. The call ended abruptly. I sat back, feeling strangely calm despite the threats. We got it all, Amir confirmed, stopping the recording. The coercion, the admission about Logacorp, the money laundering implications. Will it be enough? I asked. Combined with what we already know about his location and the transfers? It's compelling evidence of criminal intent, not just a domestic, financial dispute. I nodded slowly. Then it's time to talk to your FBI contact. Officially this time. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in the local FBI field office, speaking with Special Agent Diana Chen. I provided everything: the bank statements, the recorded call, the information about Ryan's location in Aruba. This dovetails with our ongoing investigation into Logicorp, Agent Chen confirmed. We've been building a case against several executives for systematic embezzlement. Your husband and Ms. Winters weren't on our radar as major players, but this changes things. What about my savings? I asked. Can it be recovered? International financial crimes can be complicated, she admitted. But Aruba does cooperate with U.S. authorities on fraud cases. It's not guaranteed, but there's a good chance we can freeze their accounts before they move the money again. I nodded, accepting the uncertainty. What should I do if Ryan contacts me again? Keep the lines of communication open. Express interest in his investment opportunity. We may need your help to gather more evidence. As I left the FBI office, I felt both vindicated and hollow. The wheels of justice were turning, but my life remained in shambles. My marriage was over. My home, once filled with memories I cherished, now felt contaminated by deception. Even if the FBI recovered my money, how could I recover my sense of trust? Back at the house, I found Tessa waiting on the porch. How did it go? The FBI is on it, I said, sitting beside her. Now we wait. She handed me a glass of bourbon. To new beginnings? I stared at the amber liquid, remembering shared drinks with Ryan after hard days, celebrations of anniversaries, quiet moments on this same porch. To survival, I corrected, and drank. Ryan called exactly 24 hours later, as promised. This time, I was prepared with a script developed with Agent Chen, recording equipment already running. I've been thinking about your offer, I said before he could speak. And his voice was tense, impatient. I might be able to get the money, but I need more details first. Exactly where would I be transferring these funds? And what guarantees do I have that you'll follow through on your promise to return my original investment plus the additional amount? Ryan laughed softly. You were always cautious. It's one of the things I admired about you. Past tense, as if I were already gone from his life. It's not caution, it's common sense. $200,000 is a significant sum. The return will be worth it. And you'll have my word. Your word? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Like your wedding vows? Those don't seem to have been worth much. A pause. That's not fair. Natalie and it's complicated. Uncomplicate it for me. He sighed. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. Natalie and I were working late one night on the quarterly reports. She noticed discrepancies I'd missed. One thing led to another, and we realized there was a systematic embezzlement scheme happening right under our noses. And instead of reporting it, you decided to join in? It wasn't like that, he insisted. At first, we were just gathering evidence. But then we realized how deep it went, all the way to the board level. People who crossed them had a way of disappearing from the industry completely. Careers ruined, reputations destroyed. So you stole our retirement savings as what? A safety measure? As an opportunity, he corrected. Natalie had connections through the CFO's office. We could use what we knew to leverage our own position. One big score, then disappear with new identities before anyone realized what happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The man I'd shared my life with for a decade was calmly explaining how he'd betrayed not just me, but his entire company, as if it were a reasonable career move. And the brain tumor story? Where did that come from? We needed a sympathetic cover, something that would explain sudden absences, large withdrawals. No one questions a medical emergency. My anger flared. Except those of us who've actually faced real medical emergencies. Those of us who've had to fight the VA for basic care while you fabricated a brain tumor for your girlfriend. Morgan, tell me about this investment opportunity that requires my $200,000. He seemed relieved by the change in subject. We've positioned ourselves as middlemen in a transaction involving digital assets. The buyers are paying a premium for anonymity. Our cut is 30% of the total transaction value of approximately $3 million, and you need my money because we've hit a cash flow issue. The buyers want additional verification of our financial capacity before proceeding. Another $200,000 would resolve that concern and allow the transaction to complete. I fought to keep my voice neutral. When would this transaction conclude? 2 weeks, 3 at most. Then we'd be looking at a return of approximately $900,000 on our combined investment. I'm offering you $700,000 total. Your original $350,000 plus an equal amount as your share of the profits. And where would you and Natalie go afterward? Somewhere without extradition. New names, new lives. Without a backward glance at the wreckage you've left behind, he didn't deny it. This is business, Morgan. I'm offering you a way to come out ahead financially, even if other aspects of our relationship have changed. I closed my eyes, picturing Agent Chen listening to this conversation, building her case with each word Ryan spoke. I need account details, I said. Where exactly would I send this money? Ryan provided information for an account in Belize, not Aruba. Another layer of deception, another jurisdiction to complicate any legal proceedings. I'll need 24 hours to liquidate assets and arrange the transfer, I told him. Make it 12, he countered. Our window of opportunity is closing. After the call ended, Agent Chen called immediately. We've got enough. The admission of intent, the details of the scheme, the specific amounts, it's all there. We're coordinating with international authorities to locate and freeze their assets now. What about the Belize account he wants me to transfer money to? We'll set up a controlled transfer, just enough to verify the account exists and is connected to your husband. You won't actually lose any funds. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. The FBI worked with financial crimes units in Aruba and Belize, tracking accounts, preparing legal documents, coordinating with local authorities. I provided statement after statement, signed document after document. Finally, Agent Chen called with an update. We've located them. A beachfront villa in Aruba's Palm Beach area, rented under the name Williams. Local authorities are preparing to take them into custody tonight. What about the money? I asked, the question that had driven me since this nightmare began. We've identified and frozen approximately $220,000 in the Aruba account. Another $75,000 in the Belize account you were supposed to transfer to. That's not the full amount, but it's something. Less than half of what Ryan had taken. The rest was gone, spent on luxury accommodations, or transferred to accounts we hadn't yet discovered, or converted to untraceable assets. There's something else, Agent Chen added. When we examined the Logicorp financial records more closely, we found evidence supporting your husband's claim about board-level involvement in the embezzlement scheme. The company's chairman and 2 other executives are now under investigation as well. So Ryan hadn't been lying about everything. The embezzlement scheme was real and bigger than anyone had realized. But that didn't excuse his choice to join the corruption rather than expose it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house that no longer felt like home, feeling trapped between the past I'd lost and a future I couldn't yet imagine. Around 3 a.m., my phone rang. Agent Chen. They're in custody, she reported. No resistance, but they were preparing to leave. Had tickets for a private charter to Venezuela departing tomorrow morning. I should have felt triumph, or at least relief. Instead, I felt hollow. We'll need you to come in tomorrow to review some documents, she continued. And you should know, your husband is asking to speak with you. About what? He won't say. But he's claiming there's something you need to know about an offshore message. My heart raced suddenly. An offshore message? Does that mean something to you? I don't know, I admitted. But I think I need to find out. The Meridian County Detention Center smelled like all institutional buildings, disinfectant barely masking despair. I sat in a small room with a metal table bolted to the floor, waiting for Ryan to be brought in. Agent Chen observed from behind a one-way glass, ready to intervene if necessary. When the door opened, I barely recognized my husband. 3 days in custody had left him unshaven, his normally styled hair flat and dull, the confident posture replaced by a defeated slump. The orange jumpsuit completed his transformation from successful corporate executive to common criminal. He sat across from me, his eyes fixed on the table between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Thank you for coming," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "Agent Chen said you have information about an offshore message." Ryan glanced at the one-way glass, then leaned forward slightly. "I need you to check the Belize account. The authorities have already frozen that account." "I know. But before I was arrested, I left something there. Something for you." I frowned. "What kind of something?" "A message. And information about the rest of your money." He looked directly at me for the first time. "Not all of it is gone. Morgan," my pulse quickened. "Where is it?" "Check the account transaction notes. I created a secure message that only you would understand. The password is the date we met." I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. A skill I'd developed during my military interrogation training, one I should have applied more rigorously to my own husband over the years. "Why would you leave me a message about the money when you were planning to disappear with it?" Ryan's expression shifted. Shame, perhaps, or something close to it. "Insurance, in case things went wrong." "Things like getting caught?" "Things like Natalie taking everything and disappearing, which was becoming a distinct possibility." I sat back, surprised. "You didn't trust her?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "Would you? She helped orchestrate a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, convinced me to drain our retirement account, then abandoned her supposed principles about exposing corporate corruption the moment personal profit was possible." "So, you're the victim now?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "No." He shook his head slowly. "I made my choices. But about a week ago, I discovered Natalie had been transferring funds from our joint Aruba account to a separate account I didn't have access to. She claimed it was just diversifying our assets for security, but you realize she was planning to betray you the same way you betrayed me. He didn't deny it. Check the message, Morgan. Please. Whatever happens to me, and I know I'm facing serious charges, you deserve to get your money back. I studied him, trying to reconcile this apparently remorseful man with the calculating criminal who had threatened to frame me just days earlier. Why should I believe anything you say now? Because I have nothing left to gain by lying. His eyes held mine. I've lost everything that mattered. My freedom, my reputation, my future. And you? He swallowed hard. Especially you. I stood up, unable to bear his performance of regret. I'll check the account. But don't expect forgiveness, Ryan. As I turned to leave, he called after me. There's something else you should know. About LogiCorp. The embezzlement goes deeper than anyone realizes. Even the FBI doesn't have the full picture yet. Tell Agent Chen, not me. I'm done being your confidant. Back at the FBI field office, Agent Chen arranged for me to access the frozen Belize account records. As Ryan had indicated, there was a note field in the account details. It contained a single line of text. The full amount awaits where we first talked about retirement. Password 04072013. April 7th, 2013, the day we met in Afghanistan. What does it mean? Agent Chen asked, looking over my shoulder. It could be referring to an additional account. We first discussed retirement plans at a coffee shop near Meridian Lake. Meridian Lake. Agent Chen tapped the name into her computer. There's a Meridian Lake International Bank in the Cayman Islands. It's a popular offshore banking destination. Within minutes, Agent Chen had initiated contact with Cayman banking authorities. By that evening, we had confirmation. An account existed at Meridian Lake International Bank under the name Cooper Retirement Holdings, opened 4 months earlier with an initial deposit of $200,000. That's where the rest of your money went, Agent Chen explained. Based on the transaction dates, he moved it there before meeting up with Natalie in Aruba, and he maintained sole access to it. So, while he was preparing to flee with her, he was also creating a backup plan without her knowledge. Exactly. And based on his reaction when we arrested them, I don't think Ms. Winters knew about this account either. He seemed almost relieved when we showed up. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Ryan hadn't trusted Natalie completely. Even as he betrayed me, he'd kept a separate escape hatch for himself, one that, ironically, might now help me recover the remainder of my savings. The next day, with the FBI's assistance, I initiated access to the Cayman account using the password Ryan had provided. The balance showed $2,540, the original $200,000 plus a small amount of interest. Combined with the frozen funds from Aruba and Belize, that meant nearly $500,000 could potentially be recovered, more than the original amount taken from our joint account. But there was something else in the Cayman account, a document titled The Truth, stored in the account's secure digital storage feature. I downloaded it with trembling hands. It was a comprehensive record of the LogiCorp embezzlement scheme, detailing how the company's top executives had been systematically stealing from investors, pension funds, and vendor accounts for years. Names, dates, transaction details, offshore account numbers, everything needed to unravel the entire operation. This is extraordinary, Agent Chen said as she reviewed the document. This isn't just about your husband and Ms. Winters anymore. This implicates the entire C-suite at LogiCorp and potentially board members at 3 other corporations. We're talking about financial fraud in the hundreds of millions. I stared at the document, trying to process what I was seeing. He was gathering evidence all along, even while participating in the scheme. Playing both sides, Agent Chen agreed. Which might explain why he kept this separate account. It wasn't just insurance against Ms. Winters betraying him. It was his leverage against the bigger players if they discovered what he knew. So what happens now? This evidence will be crucial in the broader investigation. As for your husband, cooperation of this magnitude would typically be considered during sentencing. It doesn't excuse his crimes, but it might reduce his punishment. Somewhat? I nodded, feeling strangely empty. The money might be recovered, justice might be served, but nothing could restore what had been broken. And my funds? I asked, focusing on the practical. The recovery process will take time. Probably months given the international jurisdictions involved. But with clear evidence of the source of these funds and your husband's statement confirming they were taken from your joint account, I'm optimistic about your chances. As I left the FBI office, I felt a weight lifting, not the weight of betrayal or loss, but the weight of uncertainty. I might not have answers for all my questions about how my decade-long marriage had unraveled so completely, but I had clarity about what came next. The future stretched before me, uncertain, but mine to shape. With or without the recovered funds, I would rebuild. It's what I'd been trained to do, after all. Adapt, overcome, survive. 3 months after Ryan's arrest, I sat in a federal courtroom watching as he pleaded guilty to reduced charges of wire, fraud, and conspiracy. In exchange for his cooperation, the prosecutors had agreed to recommend a 5-year sentence instead of the potential 25 he was facing. Natalie Winters had made no such deal. She was fighting the charges, maintaining that she was merely following orders from the CFO. The Logicorp scandal had exploded into one of the largest corporate fraud cases in recent history. 8 executives now faced charges, and the company's stock had plummeted as investors fled. Thousands of employees, innocent bystanders in the scheme, were left scrambling for new jobs as the company began massive layoffs. I felt no satisfaction watching Ryan in his prison jumpsuit. His shoulders slumped as the judge accepted his plea. Just a profound sadness for the wreckage all around us. Lives derailed, trust shattered, futures altered forever. After the hearing, Ryan's attorney approached me in the hallway. He'd like to speak with you, if you're willing. I hesitated. Our last conversation had been strictly about the offshore accounts and evidence. What more could there be to say? Just 5 minutes, the attorney added. He's being transferred to federal prison tomorrow, I agreed, more out of closure than curiosity. They led me to a small conference room where Ryan waited, hands cuffed in front of him, a marshal standing by the door. "Thank you for coming," he said when we were seated. He looked better than he had in the detention center, cleaner, more rested, though still a shadow of the man I'd married. "What do you want, Ryan?" He met my eyes directly. "To apologize, not for getting caught, not for the legal consequences, but for betraying you. You deserved better." I stayed silent, waiting for the rest. There was always more with Ryan. I've had a lot of time to think in detention, about how I ended up here, about what I threw away. He glanced down at his cuffed hands. I keep asking myself when I started down this path. Was it the first time I looked the other way at a financial discrepancy? The first time I rationalized that everyone in corporate finance cuts corners? Or was it earlier, when I started believing I deserved more than what we had? Does it matter? I asked. The result is the same. It matters to me, because I need to understand how I became someone who could hurt the one person who always had my back. His voice cracked slightly. Even now, after everything I've done, you're still the emergency contact on my paperwork. Hadn't known that, but it didn't surprise me. Ryan had always taken the path of least resistance in administrative matters. "I'll have them change that," I said evenly. He nodded. "Of course, I want you to know that I didn't plan for any of this. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a criminal, to throw away our marriage. It rarely happens that way," I said, falling back on what I'd learned counseling veterans in crisis. Big failures usually come from a series of small compromises, like a mission that goes wrong step by step, he said, referencing the military, analogies I'd often used during our marriage. The point of no return arrives before you even recognize the danger. I looked at him, really looked at him, for perhaps the first time since this nightmare began. Behind the designer clothes and corporate success, he'd always been insecure, always felt he had something to prove. The military had given me confidence, purpose, resilience. Ryan's career had given him status, but not security. The account recoveries are proceeding, I said, changing the subject. The FBI says I should have access to the funds within a few more weeks. Good. It's your money. It always was. He hesitated. What will you do now? It was a fair question. My life had been upended just as completely as his, if for different reasons. I'm selling the house, I said. Too many memories. Tessa's cousin is a real estate agent. She says the market is strong despite the LogiCorp implosion. And after that? I hadn't told anyone my plans yet, not even Tessa or Amir. But something made me want to share this with Ryan, perhaps because he represented a chapter of my life that was definitively closing. I'm opening a rehabilitation facility specifically for female veterans. There's a property outside town that used to be a small wellness retreat. It's perfect for what I have in mind. His eyes widened slightly. Your own facility? That's incredible, Morgan. You've always been amazing with the veterans at the center. The need is there, I said simply. Female veterans have unique challenges that often go unaddressed in traditional VA settings. I've saved enough to make a good start, and once the recovered funds come through, I'll have the capital for proper staffing and equipment. You'll be wonderful at it. The pride in his voice seemed genuine, which only made the moment more painful. This glimpse of the supportive partnership we might have maintained if he'd made different choices. The marshal indicated our time was nearly up. Ryan straightened in his chair. There's one more thing, he said quickly. The evidence I gathered on LogiCorp, it's only part of the story. There's another document in that Cayman account hidden in a subfolder. The password is Sandstorm Alpha, the code name of your first deployment. My body tensed. What's in it? Insurance, he said quietly. Names, dates, account numbers for every major player in the scheme, including some the FBI hasn't identified yet. People with enough power and money to make problems disappear, along with anyone causing those problems. Are you saying you're in danger? I'm saying we both might be. These people play a long game, Morgan. My plea deal has disrupted their operations, but fortunes that size don't disappear overnight. Neither do grudges. The marshal stepped forward. Time's up. Ryan stood, the chains at his wrists clinking softly. Be careful, Morgan. Use the information if you need to, but be very careful who you trust with it. As they led him away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Concern for his safety, appreciation for the warning, frustration that even now, even after everything, his actions were still complicating my life. Back at home, the house that would soon belong to someone else, I contacted Agent Chen about the additional document. She arranged for secure access to the Cayman account again, and together we retrieved the hidden file. What we found was even more explosive than the first document. This wasn't just about LogiCorp. This was about a network of financial manipulation, spanning multiple corporations, investment firms, even touching on political campaign funds. Agent Chen shook her head in disbelief. This would take years to fully investigate. Is Ryan in danger because of this information? She looked at me seriously. Anyone connected to this information could potentially be at risk, including you now that you know about it. What should I do? Let us handle the investigation. As for you, she paused. It might be wise to keep a low profile until we've made more arrests. Maybe accelerate your plans to move. That night, I packed my essential belongings, preparing for a quicker departure than I'd originally planned. As I sorted through 10 years of accumulated memories, I found myself lingering over photographs. Ryan and me in happier times, smiling, connected, unaware of what was to come. I placed the photos in a box marked storage, not ready to dispose of them, but not wanting them in my new life either. Whatever Ryan and I had shared, whatever I had believed about our marriage, it was part of my history, neither fully real nor completely false. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of Valor Haven, watching as the morning sun illuminated the mountains beyond my new property. The former wellness retreat had been transformed into a specialized rehabilitation center for female veterans, with 6 residential cabins, a main therapy building, and 5 acres of peaceful woodland for hiking and outdoor activities. The sale of our house had been finalized quickly, well above asking price despite the Logicorp scandal's impact on local real estate. Combined with the recovered funds from Ryan's various accounts, which ultimately totaled $510,000 after legal fees, I had enough capital to purchase the property outright and fund initial operations until our grant applications were processed. Tessa had joined me as our medical director, leaving her EMT position for this new venture. Amir handled our cybersecurity and IT systems while maintaining his primary career. We'd hired 3 additional staff members, all veterans themselves, and were preparing to welcome our first 6 residents the following week. Coffee? Tessa appeared beside me, holding out a steaming mug. Thanks. I took it gratefully, the morning chill still lingering despite the bright sunshine. Any word on the VA contract? Final approval came through this morning, she said, grinning. We're officially a recognized treatment facility for service-related trauma. They've already referred 3 additional women for next month's cohort. Exhaled in relief. The Veterans Affairs approval was crucial for long-term sustainability. Without it, we'd have been limited to private insurance and out-of-pocket patients. We did it, I said softly. Actually did it. Did you doubt we would? Tessa bumped my shoulder gently with hers. When have you ever failed at a mission, Captain Riley? I smiled at the old rank she sometimes used to tease me. There's a first time for everything. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I checked the screen, an unknown number with a federal government. Area code. Morgan Riley, I answered, stepping away from Tessa. Ms. Riley, this is Special Agent Chen. Her voice was formal, professional. I'm calling to inform you that the second phase of arrests in the Logicorp investigation happened this morning. 7 additional executives from 3 different companies were taken into custody. My grip tightened on the phone. The names from Ryan's second document? Many of them, yes. We wanted you to hear it from us before it hits the news. Given your connection to the case, I understood what she wasn't saying. These were powerful people, people with resources and grudges. People who now knew their downfall had started with evidence gathered by Ryan Cooper, and by extension, connected to me. What about security concerns? I asked. We have no specific threats, but standard precautions would be wise. I've arranged for the local field office to increase patrols near your new facility for the next few weeks. After we hung up, I stood motionless, staring at the mountains while processing this new development. The investigation was moving forward. Justice was being served. But at what potential cost to my fresh start? Everything okay? Tessa asked, rejoining me. I shared the update, watching her expression shift from excitement about the arrests to concern about potential repercussions. Should we delay the opening? Maybe increase security? I shook my head firmly. No, we've worked too hard to get here. Our first residents need this place. Women who've served their country and are now fighting battles on the home front. I won't let fear of what might happen derail what we know needs to happen. The week passed in a flurry of final preparations. Furniture deliveries, staff training, program scheduling, the everyday details that transformed our vision into reality. I kept Agent Chen's warning in mind. implementing reasonable security measures without creating a fortress mentality that would undermine our therapeutic environment. The day before our official opening, I received a letter forwarded from my attorney. The return address was a federal correctional institution in Pennsylvania. Ryan's handwriting. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it, unsure if I wanted whatever message it contained to intrude on this new chapter of my life. Eventually, curiosity won out. "Morgan, my attorney tells me your rehabilitation center opens this week. I wanted to write and wish you success. What you're building is important, the kind of meaningful work I should have supported more fully when we were together. I've been following the news about the ongoing Logicorp investigation. With the recent arrests, I expect things may get more complicated for a while. Please be careful. These people play by different rules than we're used to. There's something else you should know. During my earliest discussions with Natalie about the embezzlement scheme, I discovered mentions of your rehabilitation center in internal Logicorp communications. Your facility wasn't chosen randomly for those inflated equipment requisitions I mentioned during our last meeting. They were using veterans programs like yours as fronts for money movement, specifically targeting centers with military-connected leadership who they believed wouldn't question financial support for their programs. You weren't just collateral damage in my poor choices. You were potentially being set up as an unwitting participant in their scheme. I diverted their attention from you when I realized this, redirecting their focus to other potential targets. It's partly why I got so deeply involved, to keep you clear of their operations. This doesn't excuse my actions. Nothing could. But I wanted you to know that in my distorted thinking, I believed I was protecting you, even as I was betraying you in other ways. I've provided this information to the FBI as well, so they can identify other veterans programs that may have been compromised. I hope Valor Haven becomes everything you've dreamed it could be. The world needs more people like you, Morgan. People who build rather than take, who heal rather than harm. Be well, Ryan. I folded the letter carefully, emotions swirling too turbulently to name. The idea that Logicorp had specifically targeted veterans programs was sickening, but not surprising. The suggestion that Ryan had somehow been protecting me while simultaneously betraying me was harder to process. Had he rewritten history in his mind to cast himself in a more noble light? Or was there a grain of truth to his claim? I might never know for certain. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer, unwilling to discard it, but equally unwilling to dwell on it. Tomorrow, our first residents would arrive. Women carrying visible and invisible scars from their service. Women who needed what we had built here far more than I needed clarity about Ryan's mixed motives. The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for our opening day. I'd barely slept, a combination of excitement and lingering unease from Ryan's letter. But as our team gathered for a final briefing, I felt a calm determination replace the anxiety. Remember why we're here, I told the assembled staff. These women have already faced challenges most civilians can't imagine. They've survived war zones, institutional barriers, personal battles. They've come here because traditional approaches haven't worked for them. We're not just offering treatment. We're offering understanding from people who've walked similar paths. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, expressions serious but committed. Every person here had chosen this work not for the salary, which was modest at best, but because they believed in its importance. Whatever challenges come our way, we face them together, I concluded, just like we did in uniform. At precisely 10 a.m., the first vehicle appeared on our winding driveway, a VA transport van carrying 3 of our initial residents. I watched from the main building's porch as Tessa went to greet them, her medical clipboard in hand, but her approach warm and informal, exactly the tone we wanted to set. The women who emerged looked like so many I'd served with over the years. Outwardly tough, inwardly carrying burdens invisible to casual observers. One used a cane, another had the hypervigilant scan of someone with severe PTSD. The third moved with the careful precision of someone managing chronic pain. As I stepped forward to welcome them to Valor Haven, I felt something shift inside me, a sense of rightness, of purpose reclaimed. This was where I belonged, doing work that mattered in a place I had built from the ashes of betrayal. Whatever Ryan had taken from me, money, trust, years of my life, he had inadvertently given me something too. The push I needed to create something entirely my own, something no one could take away. 1 year after opening Valor Haven, I stood at the podium during our anniversary celebration, looking out at the crowd gathered on our expanded grounds. What had begun with 6 residents had grown to a program serving 24 women at a time, with a waiting list that testified to the desperate need for our specialized services. The event was bittersweet. We were celebrating not just our success, but honoring the memory of Jessica Ramirez, our 3rd resident, who had lost her battle with depression 2 months after completing our program. Her family had established a scholarship fund in her name, ensuring that veterans without adequate insurance coverage could still access our services. Valor Haven exists because of a betrayal, I said, beginning my speech with a truth I rarely shared publicly. When my husband emptied our joint account and disappeared, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Many knew pieces of my story, but few had heard me speak about it directly. What I discovered in the aftermath was that the most valuable things can't be stolen. My training, my experience, my relationships with fellow veterans like Tessa and Amir. I nodded toward my colleagues. These were assets no one could take from me, and they became the foundation for something far more meaningful than retirement: savings. As I continued my speech, I spotted a man at the back of the gathering, tall, professionally dressed, with the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. Agent Chen had mentioned she might send someone to assess security during our public event, given that the Lagacorp investigation was still generating headlines and court proceedings. The latest news had broken just yesterday. Natalie Winters had finally reached a plea deal after fighting the charges for over a year. In exchange for testimony against the remaining defendants, she would serve a reduced sentence of 3 years. Ryan, already 16 months into his 5-year term, had been a model prisoner according to his attorney, teaching financial literacy, classes to fellow inmates, and developing a program to help them avoid predatory banking practices upon release. I finished my speech to warm applause, then mingled with supporters, local officials, and the families of current and former residents. The event had attracted more media attention than we'd anticipated, partly due to a recent feature in a national magazine highlighting innovative approaches to veteran healthcare. "Ms. Riley?" A reporter from the local newspaper approached. "Can I get a quick statement about the impact of the Lagacorp scandal on veteran support services in the region? With the latest guilty pleas, there's renewed interest in how the embezzlement affected community programs." I'd prepared for such questions, knowing they were inevitable. While I can't comment on ongoing legal proceedings, I can tell you that Valor Haven is committed to complete financial transparency. All our records are independently audited, and we've implemented safeguards to ensure that every dollar donated or granted goes directly to supporting our mission. The reporter nodded, jotting notes. "And your personal connection to the case? Has that created challenges for the center?" My experience gave me firsthand understanding of how financial betrayal impacts every aspect of one's life, I replied carefully. It's made me particularly attuned to the financial insecurity many female veterans face after service, especially those managing service-related health issues without adequate support systems. After the reporter moved on, I found myself approached by the federal agent I'd noticed earlier. He introduced himself as Special Agent Torres. "Impressive operation you've built here," he commented, surveying the grounds with an appraising eye. "Thank you. It's been a team effort." Agent Chen sends her regards. She wanted me to give you an update personally rather than over the phone. his voice lowered. "We've identified 3 additional veteran centers that were being used in the fight. Logi Corp scheme, all run by former military personnel who had no idea they were being manipulated." I nodded, unsurprised but still disturbed. "Have you been able to clear them of involvement?" "Yes. The evidence your ex-husband provided was instrumental in establishing that these program directors were targets, not accomplices. Without his documentation, they might have become scapegoats when the main players started making deals." This new information lent credence to Ryan's claim about trying to protect me and other veterans from being implicated. It didn't excuse his crimes, but it added another layer of complexity to a situation I'd once viewed in stark terms of betrayal and victimhood. "There's something else," Agent Torres continued. "The Bureau has been monitoring some concerning communications among associates of the defendants awaiting trial. Nothing actionable yet, but enough to warrant caution. We'd recommend reviewing your security protocols, especially for public events like this one." I thanked him for the warning, assuring him we would take appropriate measures. After he departed, I sought out Amir, who oversaw our security systems along with his technical contributions. As the celebration wound down and staff began cleaning up, Tessa found me sitting alone on a bench overlooking the meditation garden we'd added 6 months earlier. "Penny for your thoughts?" She handed me a cup of coffee, my third of the day, but who was counting? Just reflecting on the journey. From military service to civilian life, from marriage to betrayal, from rebuilding to this. I gestured at the thriving facility around us. "Regrets?" she asked directly, in the way only a longtime friend can. I considered the question seriously. "About the marriage? Some. I wish I'd paid more attention to our finances, obviously. Wish I'd recognized what Ryan was becoming before it was too late." I paused. "But about what came after?" "No. This place exists because everything fell apart. I can't regret that." Later that evening, alone in my small cabin at the edge of the property, I opened my laptop to review the center's finances, a weekly ritual I never skipped, regardless of how tired I might be. The memory of Ryan's betrayal had instilled a vigilance that bordered on obsession when it came to our accounts. Everything was in order, as usual. Our operating costs were within budget, donation levels were steady, and the new grant from the Department of Defense had been properly allocated to our PTSD research partnership with the university. As I closed the financial software, I noticed an email notification from Ryan's attorney. My heart rate increased slightly. These communications were rare and usually contained updates about Ryan's case that might impact the ongoing investigation or potential security concerns. I opened it hesitantly. "Ms. Riley, my client, has asked me to inform you that he will be eligible for transfer to a minimum security facility next month, based on his cooperation and behavior during incarceration. This change in status means he will have increased communication privileges, including email access through the monitored prison system. He wanted you to know in advance, with the assurance that he will not contact you directly unless you indicate a willingness for such communication. Additionally, he has signed the final divorce papers as requested. They require only your signature to be filed with the court. Respectfully, Michael Grayson." Esker and I stared at the screen, emotions swirling. The divorce papers had been delayed repeatedly due to complications with the financial investigations and Ryan's limited access to legal counsel. Now, with his signature, all that remained was mine, a pen stroke to formally end 10 years of marriage. I closed the laptop without replying. Tomorrow would be soon enough to respond, to sign the papers, to close that chapter completely. Tonight was for acknowledging how far I'd come, not just surviving betrayal, but transforming it into something meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Amir. "Security upgrades installed. Sleep well, Captain." I smiled at his message. Throughout all of this, the betrayal, the investigation, the rebuilding, I'd never been alone. My military family had rallied around me, proving that the bonds formed in service could withstand any civilian crisis. As I prepared for bed, I glanced at the framed photograph on my nightstand. Not of Ryan, but of my unit in Afghanistan, arms around each other's shoulders, dusty and exhausted, but unified by purpose and trust. It was this foundation that had saved me when my marriage collapsed. This training that had taught me to find opportunity in crisis. These relationships that had sustained me through the darkest moments. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Residents, struggling with trauma, funding concerns, security threats, the final divorce papers. But tonight, watching the moonlight cast shadows across the grounds of Valor Haven, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. Not the naive peace of someone untouched by betrayal, but the hard-won serenity of a survivor who had built something worthy from the ruins. 2 years after Ryan's arrest, I received a call from Agent Chen that would once again shift the course of my life. "Morgan, we've identified a significant security concern. Can you come to the field office today?" 3 hours later, I sat across from Agent Chen and her supervisor, Director Phillips, in a conference room with no windows. The final Logicorp trial begins next week, Director Phillips began without preamble. Harrison Blackwell, the former chairman, is the last defendant standing. Everyone else has taken deals. I nodded. I'd been following the case through news reports and occasional updates from Agent Chen. "We have credible intelligence that Blackwell has arranged for someone to access the evidence against him," she continued. "Specifically, to eliminate witnesses who might testify." My throat tightened. "Ryan?" "He's secure in federal custody," Agent Chen assured me. "But there's another target we're concerned about." She slid a folder across the table. I opened it to find my own photograph staring back at me, along with surveillance images of Valor Haven. Me? But I'm not testifying. I have no direct knowledge of Blackwell's activities. "It's not about testimony," Director Phillips explained. "It's about the second document Ryan provided, the one implicating Blackwell in transactions beyond Logicorp. Blackwell knows that document exists and believes you have access to additional information that wasn't included in the formal evidence. But I don't," I protested. "Everything Ryan gave me went straight to you." "We know that," Agent Chen said gently. "But Blackwell doesn't believe it. He thinks Ryan kept insurance policies with trusted allies, namely you." The implications sank in slowly. "So Blackwell has put a target on my back based on information I don't even have?" "Essentially, yes. We've intercepted communications suggesting he's hired someone to resolve the Morgan Riley problem before the trial begins. We're working to identify and neutralize the threat, but in the meantime, I need to disappear," I finished for her. "Temporarily," Director Phillips clarified. "We're prepared to place you in protective custody until Blackwell's trial concludes." Protective custody. Away from Valor Haven, away from the residents who depended on our programs, away from the life I'd rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. How long? The trial is expected to last 6 to 8 weeks. With appeals and sentencing, the threat might persist for several months. I closed the folder, thinking of the 24 women currently in residence at our facility, the staff depending on their salaries, the progress we'd made in establishing Valor Haven as a trusted resource. There has to be another option. Director Phillips exchanged glances with Agent Chen. There is, but it carries significant risk. They outlined an alternative approach. Instead of hiding me, they would use me as bait in a controlled operation to identify and capture whoever Blackwell had sent. I would continue my normal routines at Valor Haven under close surveillance, with undercover agents integrated into our staff and security team. This would allow your facility to continue operations without disruption, Agent Chen explained, but it would place you in potential danger, despite our precautions. I considered both options, weighing the risks against the needs of those depending on Valor Haven. The military strategist in me recognized the tactical advantages of the second approach, controlling the battlefield, choosing the ground for confrontation. If I agree to the second option, can you guarantee the safety of our residents and staff? We'll implement a full security protocol, Director Phillips assured me. Additional personnel, enhanced monitoring systems, evacuation procedures if necessary. Their safety will be our priority alongside yours. 3 days later, Valor Haven welcomed 4 new staff members, a groundskeeper, a nutritionist, an administrative assistant, and a security consultant. All FBI agents with specialized training in protective operations. Our existing security systems were quietly upgraded, panic buttons installed in key locations, and evacuation plans rehearsed under the guise of standard emergency preparedness. Continued my normal routines, leading morning meditation sessions, conducting administrative meetings, meeting with residents individually to monitor their progress. The only outward change was the addition of a discreet tracking device disguised as a fitness watch and a communication system that allowed me constant contact with the security team. A week passed with no incident. Then, another. The LogiCorp trial began, dominating business news as Harrison Blackwell faced the jury for the first time. His attorney made confident statements about his client's innocence, claiming he had been unaware of the fraudulent activities conducted by subordinates. On the 10th day of surveillance, our security systems detected an unauthorized vehicle approaching Valor Haven through the service road that wound behind our property line. Within minutes, the FBI team was mobilized, positions secured. Residents and non-agent staff moved to designated safe areas. I remained in my office as instructed, door locked, the panic button within reach. Through my earpiece, I could hear the agents coordinating their response as they tracked the intruder's movements. A single individual on foot now, having abandoned the vehicle half a mile from our perimeter. Subject approaching the east fence line, reported the agent positioned in our observation tower. Male, approximately 6 feet tall, dressed in dark clothing, carrying what appears to be a rifle case. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my mind remained clear. This was combat of a different kind, but my training held firm. Assess, decide, act. The east fence bordered the meditation garden, deliberately positioned for its sunrise views and relative seclusion. Few security cameras covered that area, a vulnerability we had identified during our planning sessions. He's cutting through. The fence, the tower agent continued, preparing to intercept. Negative, came the response from the lead agent. Let him penetrate further. We need to establish clear intent. I listened as they tracked the intruder's progress across our grounds, moving from building to building, clearly searching for something or someone. When he approached the main administrative building where my office was located, the agents prepared to move. What happened next unfolded in seconds that seemed to stretch into hours. The intruder entered the building. Security footage showed him checking room placards, moving purposefully toward the administrative wing. He reached my office door, tested the handle, then removed something from his pocket, a lock-picking tool. Subject attempting entry to target location. Clear hostile intent established, moving to intercept. Before the intruder could breach my door, agents converged from multiple directions. There was a brief struggle, shouts for him to drop his weapon, the sounds of a physical confrontation, then silence, followed by the all-clear signal in my earpiece. Later, in the debriefing at the FBI field office, I learned the full story. The intruder was Keith Donovan, a former private military contractor with connections to several corporate security firms that had worked with LogiCorp. Financial records showed a payment of $250,000 to an offshore account in his name 3 days before Blackwell's trial began. Most chillingly, the rifle case contained not just a weapon, but surveillance photos of me, blueprints of Valor Haven's buildings, and a detailed schedule of my daily movements. He had been watching for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Without your cooperation, We might never have caught him before he acted, Agent Chen told me. The evidence we found gives us enough to charge Blackwell with conspiracy to commit murder on top of the financial crimes. He's looking at life imprisonment. Now, the operation had succeeded. The threat was neutralized. Justice would be served. Yet, as I returned to Valor Haven that evening, I couldn't shake the knowledge of how vulnerable we all were, how the ripple effects of Ryan's choices continued to impact my life years later. The next morning, I called an all-staff meeting to address what had happened. Our residents deserved the truth, even if it was frightening. Yesterday, federal authorities apprehended an armed intruder on our property, I began, watching their faces register shock and fear. He was sent by someone connected to my ex-husband's case, someone who believed I had information that could harm them. Murmurs spread through the room. I raised my hand for quiet. The threat has been eliminated. Additional security measures will remain in place for the foreseeable future. But I want to be absolutely transparent with you all. My past came very close to endangering this community we've built together, and I take full responsibility for that. I paused, expecting anger or accusations. Instead, one of our residents, a former Army sergeant who had survived an IED attack that killed 3 members of her unit, stood up. "With all due respect, Captain Riley, that's bullshit," she said, using the direct language that characterized our community. "You didn't invite this threat. You didn't create it. You faced it head-on to protect us, just like you've been doing. Since you opened these doors," one by one others stood, voicing similar sentiments, not minimizing the danger, but refusing to let me shoulder blame for circumstances beyond my control. In that moment, I recognized something profound. Valor Haven wasn't just a place where I helped others heal. It was where I was healing too. Surrounded by women who understood that surviving wasn't always clean or simple or fair. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset, a ritual that had become essential to my well-being. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a temporary phone issued to inmates with communication privileges. "Ryan, heard about what happened. I'm sorry my actions continue to endanger you. Whatever you might think of me, please know I never wanted this for you." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I know. It was the first direct communication we'd had in nearly 2 years. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement of a truth too complex for simple categorization. As darkness fell over Valor Haven, I thought about the long journey from betrayal to this moment. The money Ryan had taken, financial security I'd thought essential, had been replaced by something more valuable. Purpose, community, the knowledge that I could face whatever came next. Not alone, but surrounded by others who understood both brokenness and strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. But tonight, in this place built from the aftermath of betrayal, I was exactly where I needed to be. 5 years to the day after Ryan emptied our joint account, I received a certified letter from his attorney. Inside was a cashier's check for $700,000 and a brief note. As promised, your original investment plus equal share of returns. I stood in my office at Valor Haven, staring at the check with a mix of disbelief and irony. The money he'd promised during that desperate phone call from Aruba, the supposed returns from his investment opportunity, had materialized after all these years. A separate envelope contained a handwritten letter from Ryan, now in his final months of incarceration. The investment was real, though not as I described it. I placed a portion of our savings in a legitimate trust before everything fell apart, managed by someone outside LogiCorp's reach. It grew more than expected. This belongs to you. No strings, no expectations. That evening, I gathered our staff and residents in the main hall. "Today, something unexpected happened," I began, explaining the arrival of funds that doubled our operating budget. "What will you do with it?" asked our newest resident, a helicopter pilot recovering from traumatic brain injury. I smiled. We're establishing the Phoenix Fund, a grant program for female veterans wanting to start businesses or educational pursuits after completing rehabilitation. Because sometimes the greatest triumph isn't just surviving betrayal, it's creating something new from the ashes. As applications for the first Phoenix grants arrived in the following months, I often thought about the strange journey that had brought us here. The money Ryan took had never been the most valuable thing I possessed. My true fortune had been within me all along: resilience, purpose, and the capacity to transform pain into possibility. Sometimes you lose everything only to discover you had more than you realized. And sometimes, the very thing meant to destroy you becomes the foundation for something greater than you ever imagined.